She had lived 63 quiet years without ever being called Mom. No little feet had run down her hallway. No drawings had been pinned to the fridge. No one had ever whispered, "Good night, Mama," through the crack of a bedroom door. It wasn't regret that settled in her chest over the years. It was something gentler, a kind of stillness. The kind that grows quietly, like dust in corners you no longer bother to sweep. Marriage had come and gone. Love, too. And though she had dreamed once of lullabies and school lunches, of scraped knees and bedtime stories, life had offered other paths. Some sweet, some hard, all silent. She poured her heart into other things. She volunteered at the library. She planted herbs on the windowsill. She sent birthday cards to nieces and nephews who rarely wrote back. And she learned to cradle her own softness, like a secret. Most days, her house was filled with the sounds of a ticking clock, the hum of the kettle, and the steady rustle of pages turning in old books. It was enough. Not full, not bright, but enough. Until one Tuesday afternoon, she was outside, tending to the small patch of lavender by her gate, when a child's voice floated across the fence, light, high, and unfamiliar. "Mom?" She paused, hand still in the soil, heart still in her chest. She looked up. A little girl stood there, no more than 6, with tangled hair and a jelly-smeared chin. She clutched a stuffed rabbit and blinked at the old woman as if she belonged to her. "I think you have the wrong house," the old woman said gently. But the girl only smiled. "I know. But you smell like a mom." The words landed somewhere deep. Somewhere the woman thought had long been closed. She didn't answer. She simply opened the gate. Slowly, carefully. And the girl walked in like she'd always known the way. Her house had always been quiet, but after 63 years of living, it no longer felt like a silence to escape. It felt like something she had earned. Like a soft chair worn into the shape of her body. Like the scent of lavender that lingered in the curtains long after she stopped placing sachets in the drawers. The cottage wasn't large. Just 2 bedrooms, one she slept in, and one she called the Blue Room, though no one had slept there in decades. It held a twin bed with a floral quilt, a wooden chair draped in a shawl that used to belong to her mother, and a bookshelf filled with old novels she meant to reread one day. She never rushed. Time was no longer something to chase. The kitchen was her favorite room. The window above the sink faced east, and every morning she stood there, tea in hand, watching the sun rise over the neighbor's roof like a quiet promise. She always used the same mug, white ceramic, with a faded sunflower on the side. A gift from a coworker many years ago, long retired, perhaps even passed on. She didn't know, but she remembered her laugh. She still baked, though she rarely had anyone to feed. On Sundays, she'd make something sweet, banana bread, sometimes cinnamon cookies, and place a few pieces into tins to bring to the church thrift shop on Mondays. No one ever asked her to, but they always smiled when she did. The hallway had grown familiar with her footsteps. The old grandfather clock ticked steadily in the corner, more a companion than a timekeeper now. She hadn't changed the time on it in years. It chimed when it wanted to, and that was good enough. She didn't drive much anymore. The grocery store was just 3 blocks down, and she enjoyed the walk, slow, measured, with a cane she used more for balance than necessity. Along the way, she would pass by gardens in various states of bloom and disrepair, smile at strangers she didn't expect would smile back, and sometimes pick up fallen leaves that struck her as too beautiful to ignore. She spoke aloud more often these days, not to anyone in particular, just to herself and to the walls that had long grown used to her voice. "Now where did I leave those scissors?" Or, "Oh, listen to that rain, it's heavier than yesterday, isn't it?" She liked the rain. It gave her an excuse to sit by the window and do nothing at all. In the evenings, she'd settle into her old armchair, a crocheted blanket over her knees, a cup of peppermint tea in her hand, and a book opened more out of comfort than curiosity. Sometimes she read a paragraph and let it sit with her for an hour. Sometimes she didn't read at all, just held the book and let her eyes wander to the fireplace, to the photographs above the mantel. One frame held a picture of her as a young woman, 21, full of curls and mischief. Another showed her and her late husband on the day they bought the house. He wore a plaid shirt, she a yellow dress, and both looked too young to understand how much time they had just signed up to share. They had talked once about children, maybe more than once. There had even been a name picked out, Henry, if it was a boy. But miscarriages and medical words and quiet heartbreak made the conversation grow softer each year, until one day, it was folded away entirely. She had learned to live without motherhood, not with bitterness, but with quiet adaptation. She had poured her nurturing into Herbs, into neighbors' cats that occasionally wandered into her yard, into nieces and nephews who came every other Christmas and sometimes forgot her birthday. It was enough, or so she had taught herself to believe. When the young woman moved in next door, thin, tired, rushing always, with a daughter never more than a few steps behind, she didn't think much of it. She nodded politely across the hedges, admired the child's bright pink boots, and returned to trimming her rose bush. She hadn't learned the child's name. Children came and went like seasons. She didn't expect to matter, but she noticed. She noticed how often the little girl was alone in the yard, humming to herself or talking to her rabbit. She noticed how the mother came and went at odd hours, sometimes before dawn, sometimes after sunset, and how her shoulders sagged even when standing upright. One morning, the child had dropped her toy in the driveway, and the old woman had picked it up and set it gently on their porch. She hadn't knocked. She just didn't want the rabbit to get rained on. And then, days later, the voice at the gate. "Mom?" That single word had reached deeper into her than she could explain. It echoed. It cracked something open. Not painfully, just enough to let in air that had not touched certain parts of her heart in decades. She hadn't told anyone. Who would she tell? She wrote it down, though, in the little brown journal she kept by the lamp. Today, a child mistook me for something I never became, and somehow it felt true. She closed the book and sat with that sentence for a long time. Outside, the wind moved through the rosemary. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like the house was empty. The next day, the child returned. It was mid-afternoon, and the old woman, who went by Mrs. Eleanor to the few who still used her name, was sitting on the front porch with her knitting resting quietly in her lap. The breeze was warm, and the sun played softly on the porch railing, casting long shadows across the faded wood. She heard the familiar squeak of the neighbor's gate, then the sound of small footsteps skipping, hesitating, skipping again. Then that same voice, clear, high, and without doubt. "Hi, Mom." Eleanor turned her head slowly. There she was, the little girl from yesterday. Pink leggings, a t-shirt with a cat and sunglasses, rabbit plush in one arm, a juice box in the other. She was leaning casually against the wooden fence, as if she had every right to be there, as if this was already home. Eleanor blinked once, then again. "I'm not your mother, sweetheart," she said gently, not unkindly. "I know," the girl replied, sipping her juice. "But you feel like one." There it was again, that same phrase. It struck Eleanor not as strange, but as oddly precise. As if this child could see something others had long forgotten to look for. She gestured toward the empty rocking chair beside her. "Would you like to sit for a bit?" The girl's face brightened, not with surprise, but with the ease of someone receiving something already expected. She stepped through the low garden gate and climbed the 3 porch steps with confident little feet, plopping down into the creaky old chair like it had been waiting just for her. "I'm Lily," she said between sips. "I'm 6 3/4. Eleanor smiled softly. "That's a very precise age." Lily nodded. "Mom says I always count the quarters." They sat there for a while, just rocking gently, the breeze threading through the chimes above them. "So," Eleanor said after a while, "where is your mother today?" "Work," Lily replied. "She works a lot. Sometimes she's tired, and sometimes she forgets things. But she always kisses me goodnight, even if I'm already asleep." Eleanor nodded. She didn't ask more. She'd lived long enough to know that children say what they need, and the rest is best left unpressed. "You live alone?" Lily asked after a pause. "I do," Eleanor answered. "Just me and my books and this porch." "And your flowers," Lily added. "Your yard smells like grandma tea." Eleanor chuckled, a soft sound, surprised by its own return. "Well, that's the lavender and rosemary." Would you like to smell them up close? Lily nodded. Together, they walked into the little garden, not large, but lovingly kept. Eleanor bent down to pluck a sprig of rosemary and handed it to the girl, who sniffed it and wrinkled her nose. Smells like pizza, she giggled. Indeed it does, Eleanor replied. But it also smells like memory. The afternoon passed like that, slowly, sweetly, like sunlight moving across an old table. Lily told stories about school, about her rabbit named General Marshmallow, and how she was afraid of thunder but not bees. Eleanor listened, truly listened, with the kind of attention only someone who has lived long and quietly can offer. No interruptions, no impatience, just presence. Eventually, Lily yawned. Do you need to go home? Eleanor asked. Lily shook her head. I think Mom works till dinner. Eleanor hesitated. Then she said, well, would you like to stay for a snack? Lily's face lit up. Do you have cookies? Not yet, Eleanor smiled. But I believe we can fix that. They went inside, Eleanor's home smelling of old wood, dried herbs, and something unmistakably gentle. Lily took off her shoes without being asked and padded across the floor like she belonged. She stood on a small stool in the kitchen and stirred the batter while Eleanor cracked eggs and added flour. When the cookies were done, soft, golden, edged with cinnamon, they sat together at the kitchen table, sipping warm milk and breaking the cookies into halves and quarters. Lily looked around the room as she chewed. You don't have kid stuff, she said. Eleanor nodded. No, I never had children. Lily blinked. Oh, then, but I still think you're a mom. Eleanor paused. She wanted to correct her. Wanted to explain that being a mother was something official, something documented, something shaped by biology or adoption papers or years of scraped knees and packed lunches. But instead, she said, why do you think that? Lily shrugged. Because you listen. Because you made cookies. Because your house feels safe. Eleanor swallowed. Something warm spread in her chest, slow and deep and unexpected. She reached out and smoothed a strand of hair from Lily's forehead. Thank you, Lily, she said softly. That means more than you know. The girl smiled, crumbs on her cheek, and leaned into the touch. It was not a beginning, not exactly. Nor was it something planned. But it was real. That night, after Lily had gone home, skipping across the yard with the leftover cookies in a paper napkin, Eleanor sat in her armchair, staring at the empty rocking chair across from her. She didn't feel lonely. She didn't feel confused. She felt expanded, like her world, after so many years of settling, had taken a deep breath and shifted, just slightly, toward something new. She wrote in her journal that night. She called me Mom again today. And this time, I let it land. From that afternoon forward, Lily began visiting nearly every day. There was never an agreement, no spoken invitation, no rules. It simply became their rhythm, a gentle, mutual understanding that sometime in the afternoon, just before the shadows lengthened across the garden stones, a small knock would sound at the gate. Or sometimes not even a knock. Just Lily, standing there with her rabbit in one hand and a story in the other. Eleanor began preparing for her without realizing it. 2 juice boxes in the fridge instead of 1. An extra teacup washed and ready. Cookies in a tin she hadn't used in years, now stocked weekly with something soft and cinnamon sweet. The house felt a little more alive each day, not noisier, just warmer. Lily would come in, take off her shoes without being told, and wander through the rooms like they belonged to a part of her imagination. She never asked questions about the quiet things, the covered furniture, the photographs of people she didn't know. She simply moved through the space with the confidence of someone who trusted what it gave her: safety, kindness, and a chair that rocked just right. She brought stories, most of them small. A friend at school who couldn't pronounce the letter R. A teacher who wore glittery shoes. Her rabbit, General Marshmallow, who had eaten 3 pages of her math homework. A story that changed in detail with each telling. Eleanor listened to everyone. Not with exaggerated interest, not with patronizing smiles, but with real attention. The kind of attention a child remembers without knowing why. The kind that tells them you matter. I'm here. Sometimes, Lily would fall asleep mid-sentence, curled up in the garden hammock with a half-eaten cookie in one hand. Eleanor would watch over her quietly, brushing a wisp of hair off her forehead, then return to her knitting or reading, as if her whole life had been waiting for this calm. Other days they baked, or pressed flowers, or painted rocks with funny faces, and tucked them under the rosemary bush to surprise the worms. And then there were the moments that went deeper, the ones that arrived quietly, unannounced, and left something different behind. Like the day Lily came with tear-streaked cheeks, her favorite rabbit missing one ear, and said nothing at all for 20 minutes. Eleanor didn't ask what happened. She simply poured warm milk, set out a blanket, and waited until Lily crawled into her lap and whispered, "I wish you were my real mom." Eleanor felt her heart catch, not break, but catch, the way a wind chime catches a sudden breeze. She didn't say, "I'm not." She didn't say, "You already have one." She just said softly, "You're safe here." And Lily nodded, eyes closed, the weight of the world in her small, quiet breath. That evening, Eleanor wrote in her journal, something she'd picked up again since Lily had started coming around. "She doesn't know how much she's given me. I used to think I'd miss the window for this kind of love. But perhaps love isn't always loud. Sometimes it arrives in soft sneakers and mismatched socks." Lily began calling her mom more frequently after that. Sometimes it slipped out in moments of excitement. "Mom, look what I drew." Other times, it was deliberate, whispered while sitting on the porch steps, head resting against Eleanor's arm. The first few times, Eleanor gently corrected her. "You know I'm not your mom, sweetheart." But Lily would just smile and say, "You feel like one." And slowly, Eleanor stopped correcting. There was one day, a warm Tuesday in late summer, when Lily was stung by a bee while chasing a butterfly in the yard. The scream was sharp and sudden, and Eleanor rushed from the kitchen, heart pounding, as though the cry had awakened something ancient in her bones. Lily was standing in the middle of the garden, clutching her arm, tears running freely. She didn't cry out for help, or for her mother. She wailed one word over and over. "Mom." Eleanor scooped her up, trembling, instinctual, and carried her inside. She held her close, whispered calming words, and pressed a cold cloth against the sting while rocking slowly in the chair by the window. "I just wanted to show you the pretty butterfly," Lily sobbed. "I know, darling," Eleanor whispered. "I know." And in that moment, she wasn't thinking about definitions, or what made a mother, or whether she had the right to feel what she was feeling. She was only thinking, "She came to me. She called for me." And I came. Later that week, Lily returned with a drawing. It was crude, drawn with colored pencils and a lot of pink. 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, standing under a tree with bright yellow blossoms. Between them was a heart, and under the picture, in a child's careful handwriting, "Me and Mom, the cozy one." Eleanor cried quietly after Lily left that day. Not from sadness, not even from joy, but from the recognition that something beautiful had grown in the corner of her life where she thought nothing else would bloom. The fridge now held more than grocery lists and calendar magnets. It held crayon memories, little love notes, a pressed leaf from Lily's best day. The kitchen smelled of warm sugar and sunlight. The porch had Lily's rain boots neatly lined next to Eleanor's worn slippers. There were signs everywhere, not of a traditional motherhood, but of something more unexpected, something chosen. And Eleanor, after all those years of assuming that door had long been closed, now opened it each day at 3:30, just in time for Lily's knock. The complication arrived, as complications often do, not with shouting or thunder, but with a quiet knock at the door. It was late afternoon, a day like any other. The sky was pale blue, the garden humming with bees, and Eleanor had just set 2 apple slices and a cinnamon cookie on a small plate, expecting Lily to arrive within moments. But it wasn't Lily at the door. It was her mother. She stood tall, her posture stiff with fatigue or worry. Eleanor couldn't quite tell. She looked younger than Eleanor remembered. Younger and older all at once. Her hair was tied in a loose bun, and her eyes held 1,000 stories in the space of one glance. "Hi," she said, her voice careful. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" Eleanor nodded. Of course. Come in. She stepped aside, but the woman remained at the threshold, as if unsure whether crossing it would change something she couldn't undo. I don't mean to sound ungrateful, the woman began, but Lily, she's been calling you Mom. Eleanor's heart paused. She nodded slowly. Yes, I know. The woman shifted her weight. Her hands trembled slightly, not from anger, Eleanor realized, but from the exhaustion of being everything for someone too young to understand how much it costs. She says it like she means it, the mother continued. She talks about you constantly. She draws you in her notebooks. I found one last night with a picture of your house and the words, my mom's garden. There was a pause. I'm her mother, she said gently but firmly. And I just wanted to make sure that wasn't being replaced. Eleanor felt something rise in her, not defense, not guilt, just clarity. She stepped back slightly, motioning to the 2 chairs on the porch. Would you like to sit? To her surprise, the woman nodded. They sat in silence for a moment, side by side but miles apart, listening to the sound of wind moving through the leaves. I never asked her to call me that, Eleanor said at last. She just did. I know, the mother replied. They sat a while longer. I work a lot, the younger woman continued, her voice quieter now. I know she needs more than I can always give. And when she started spending time here, I was relieved. You gave her something I couldn't. And then I got scared. Because what if she loved you more? Eleanor turned her head. I'm not trying to take her, she said simply. I couldn't. And I wouldn't. But if it means something to her, to have another safe place, another pair of arms to rest in, would that be such a terrible thing? The woman's eyes brimmed, but she blinked the tears back. No, she whispered. It wouldn't. They sat for a long time, watching Lily's rain boots sway gently from the porch railing where they'd been left to dry. I lost my mother when I was 12, Eleanor said softly. There's still a part of me that aches for her voice even now. I don't think a child ever forgets what it feels like to be held by someone who loves them. The mother nodded, slow and solemn. I want her to know love, she said, even if it doesn't always come from me first. It wasn't an easy thing to say, but she said it. And Eleanor, motherless, childless, but not loveless, understood. The conversation ended without ceremony. The woman rose, wiped her eyes discreetly, and said thank you before walking back across the yard. Lily didn't come that day. Eleanor sat on the porch lawn after the sun had dipped low, the untouched cookie slowly going stale beside her. She tried not to take it personally. She understood the need for space, for recalibration. But her heart missed the knock. Her hands missed the small voice asking if there were new cookies. Her chair missed the extra weight of a child leaning in without hesitation. 2 days passed. Then 3. On the 4th day, she heard footsteps on the path. She didn't look up right away. She wasn't sure if it was Lily or just her heart hoping. But then, "Hi, Mom." The voice was soft, hesitant, but unmistakable. Eleanor looked up. Lily stood at the gate, rabbit in one hand, a small, paper-wrapped bundle in the other. Her face was quiet, a little unsure, a little hopeful. I brought you something, she said. Eleanor opened the gate. Lily stepped inside and placed the bundle in her hand. Inside was a drawing, a heart filled with flowers, with 3 figures inside. One small, 2 taller. One labeled me, one labeled Mommy. The last labeled my other mom, the garden one. Eleanor looked down at the paper, then at Lily. Her voice caught in her throat. Thank you, darling. Lily shrugged. I told Mom I can have 2 moms. She said okay. Eleanor knelt slowly, gently, until she was eye level with the little girl. Do you know what that makes me? Lily grinned. Lucky? Eleanor laughed, the sound rich and trembling. Yes, very lucky. They sat on the porch again that day, as if nothing had shifted, and yet everything had. The air felt clearer, the sky bluer. The silence, the one that Eleanor had lived with for so many years, was gone. And that evening, in the final light before night, Eleanor wrote in her journal, there are things in life that arrive late, like spring in a cold year. But when they come, they are no less real. Today, I was called Mom, not as a substitute, but as something whole and chosen. The first time Eleanor was invited to dinner next door, she almost said no. Not because she didn't want to go, but because it had been so long since anyone had made a place for her at their table. She stood in her kitchen, looking down at the invitation, handwritten by Lily on purple construction paper, complete with glitter glue and 2 crooked hearts. Inside, it read, "Please come eat noodles with me and Mommy. We made space just for you. Love, Lily and General Marshmallow." Eleanor smiled, touched the edge of the card with careful fingers, and felt the quiet flutter of nerves she hadn't known she still had. She changed her blouse twice, dabbed a bit of lavender behind her ears, and when she walked across the short patch of lawn to Lily's house, carrying a small jar of lemon curd and a napkin-wrapped bundle of her best scones, she realized her hands were shaking just a little. The door opened before she even knocked. Lily stood there, eyes bright. She came. Behind her, the young mother, Sarah, Eleanor had finally learned, gave a warm, almost shy smile. "We're really glad you're here," she said. The table was simple. A pasta dinner, garlic bread, a store-bought salad. But it glowed with the kind of warmth Eleanor had missed for years, laughter between bites, a child humming while she chewed, someone refilling her glass without asking. Lily talked nonstop, of course, about school and worms, and how she decided she was going to be a flower doctor when she grew up, someone who healed sad gardens. "You're already doing that," Eleanor said gently. Lily beamed. Sarah listened too. Her glances toward Eleanor were more relaxed now, not guarded, not uncertain, but full of gratitude. She asked about Eleanor's rosemary bush, about the cookies Lily always raved about, and whether Eleanor might want to teach Lily how to knit one of those pretty dishcloths. "I'd like that very much," Eleanor said. They ate. They laughed. And afterward, Lily pulled Eleanor by the hand to the living room to show her a picture book about bees, which she read aloud with dramatic flair while nestled in the crook of Eleanor's arm. Later, when it was time to leave, Sarah walked her to the door. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything." Eleanor smiled. "I didn't do much. You showed up," Sarah said. "That's everything." That night, back in her own home, Eleanor placed the purple invitation card on her mantel. Then she sat at her table, the one that had held a single setting for so many years, and she ran her fingers over its worn wood. She whispered, "I'm still here." And it no longer sounded like a question. From then on, Eleanor was simply part of their world. On school mornings, she'd sometimes walk Lily halfway to the bus stop while Sarah rushed to work. On weekends, they'd garden together or bake tiny pies in cupcake tins. Lily insisted they set 2 extra places for General Marshmallow and Mr. Butterbean, a stuffed duck who had recently joined the crew. Eleanor began keeping a drawer in the kitchen just for Lily, crayons, a small notepad, a miniature rolling pin. She bought an extra toothbrush, which she tucked into the bathroom drawer, just in case Lily ever needed to sleep over. And one day, Sarah gave her a key. "Not because I expect anything," she said, placing it in Eleanor's palm, "but because you're part of this now." Eleanor didn't cry. She just nodded, holding the key like a small piece of something sacred. Autumn came gently that year. The maple leaves turned gold. The air cooled. Lily started 2nd grade, and Eleanor knit her a scarf the color of sunrise. Lily wore it every day. They celebrated Thanksgiving together. Just the 3 of them, 4, if you counted General Marshmallow. Eleanor brought stuffing and her late husband's recipe for cranberry relish. Sarah made a chicken instead of a turkey, and Lily made name cards for each of them in glitter pen. Eleanor's card read, "Garden Mom." When dessert was done and dishes half-washed, Sarah poured a 2nd cup of tea and sat beside Eleanor on the back steps. "I used to be afraid," she said suddenly. "Afraid Lily would grow up missing something. That I wouldn't be enough." Eleanor turned to her. "And now?" Sarah looked toward the garden, the wind catching a few leftover petals in the fading light. "Now I think, maybe she'll grow up knowing love comes in many shapes. And maybe she'll know how to offer it to others too." Eleanor didn't answer. She just placed her hand gently over Sarah's and left it there. In the weeks that followed, more things changed. Quiet things. Lily began calling her mom openly, not only in private moments, but in front of classmates, teachers, the librarian who asked who was picking her up that day. Sarah never corrected her. Eleanor never expected her to. They all knew what the word meant now. It wasn't possession. It wasn't replacement. It was presence. A few days before Christmas, Lily handed Eleanor a small wrapped box. Inside was a necklace, simple, wooden, painted in Lily's unmistakable style. A tiny heart carved into the pendant, and written on it in uneven letters, "My second first mom." Eleanor closed her eyes. There are no words for some things. Only warmth. Only breath. Only the quiet miracle of being known. She held the necklace to her chest. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. Lily looked up. "Yes, you do. Because you never left." And that night, when Eleanor returned home, she didn't sit in silence. She set 2 plates at the table, poured 2 cups of tea, one for herself, one for the part of her that had waited all these years to be called by a name that felt like home. The morning began like most others. Eleanor woke early, the way she always did, not because of an alarm, but because her body had learned over time to greet the light before it fully arrived. She moved slowly, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders, setting water to boil, feeding the cat that wasn't hers, but had decided her porch was home. The calendar on the fridge showed it was Tuesday. A Lily day. She smiled at the thought and laid out 2 plates for breakfast, toast and raspberry jam, plus an extra slice cut into triangles, the way Lily liked. It had become habit now, preparing for her presence without needing confirmation. The same way one waters the garden in spring, expecting growth, even if it hasn't appeared yet. But 3 o'clock came, and no small knock. She wasn't worried, not at first. Children have playdates, appointments, meltdowns, or maybe they fall asleep on the ride home. Eleanor made tea anyway, just in case. By 4:30, her heart had begun to stir in that old, familiar way, a soft restlessness, like wind before a storm. She stepped out onto the porch, scanning the sidewalk without really knowing what she hoped to see. By 5, the tea was cold. She told herself not to call, not to hover. Children don't belong to us, she reminded herself. They only visit our hearts, and we are lucky to be chosen for even a little while. Still, her eyes drifted toward the window all evening, catching every flicker of motion, every passing car that wasn't Lily's mother's. At 7:30, she finally left the porch light on. The next day, there was a note in her mailbox, folded neatly. Lily's handwriting. "Sorry I didn't come yesterday. I had to go to Grandma's house. I missed you so much. Can I come today?" I drew a surprise. Below the words was a sketch of the 2 of them holding hands, a heart floating overhead, and a speech bubble that read, "I love you, cozy mom." Eleanor pressed the paper to her chest, tears pricking the corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from relief. From knowing that love, when real, doesn't vanish in absence. It waits. It remembers. It returns. That afternoon, Lily came running up the walk, arms flung wide, rabbit in tow. "I missed you so much I almost exploded," she said dramatically, collapsing into Eleanor's arms with the grace of someone who knows exactly where they belong. "I missed you too, darling," Eleanor whispered, holding her tighter than usual. They didn't talk about the absence. Children don't always explain. They just notice. They read your eyes, your heartbeat, the way your hug lasts a second longer than it used to. Instead, Lily handed her the surprise, a folded paper star with glitter in the creases. "I made a wish," she said, "but I can't tell you what it is." Eleanor smiled. "Is it a good one?" "The best," Lily whispered, slipping her small hand into Eleanor's. "But don't worry. You're in it." That evening, Eleanor sat down at her writing desk, the one she hadn't used much since her husband passed. She opened a new page in her journal and wrote slowly, carefully. "The day she wasn't here, I remembered how it used to feel, the quiet, the stillness, the ache of waiting for something that never arrives. But this time, it was different, because I knew someone would come back. I have loved many things in my life, music, gardens, stories. but none of them ever knocked on my door with crayon drawings and called me Mom. She closed the journal gently, placed the folded star beside it, and turned off the lamp. Outside, the wind rustled through the rosemary. The sky darkened, and across the fence, lights flicked on in Lily's window, soft, golden, steady. The next few days passed with ease. Lily came and went, the rhythm restored. But something had quietly shifted inside Eleanor. The ache of that one missed day had reminded her that this love, this quiet, unspoken motherhood, was no longer just something sweet. It was essential. And with that came the tiniest flicker of fear. What if this wasn't forever? She had lived long enough to know that everything changes. Children grow. Families move. Life rearranges itself whether we're ready or not. She didn't want to cling. She didn't want to grasp. But she did want to remember. To hold on to this time, this precious, strange chapter that had entered her story when she thought the book was already closing. So, she started a new ritual. Every night before bed, she'd write one sentence in her journal. A memory. A moment. Something Lily had said. A scent. A color. A word. She called it the Lily line. Today she planted a daisy and named it Hope. She asked if I was alive when dinosaurs were. We sang lullabies to a worm we found in the garden. She fell asleep with her head on my knee, and I didn't move for an hour. The journal grew, page by page. Not a novel. Not a legacy. Just the simple truth of a love she had never expected written down, so it could never be lost. It was a Tuesday again. The kind of soft skeet afternoon that held the weight of something unnamed. Eleanor felt it before it happened. A stillness in the air, a quiet in the garden. The way the breeze moved a little slower, like it was listening. Lily arrived late that day, her usual sprint replaced with a hesitant shuffle. Her rabbit, General Marshmallow, was tucked tightly under one arm. No smile. No crayons. Just eyes that darted and lowered like she was keeping a secret too big for her small shoulders. Eleanor met her at the gate, kneeling down slowly. "Everything all right, darling?" Lily nodded, then shook her head, then nodded again. And then the words came, rushed and tangled. "I called for Mommy today. At school. When I fell. I didn't call for you. I'm sorry." Eleanor didn't flinch. Didn't flinch outwardly anyway. She reached out, brushing the hair from Lily's cheek, her voice a whisper in the breeze. "That's okay." "No, it's not," Lily insisted, eyes glistening. "I thought you'd be sad. Like maybe I don't love you anymore." Eleanor paused, inhaled, then placed both hands gently on Lily's tiny shoulders. "Oh, my love," she said. "You only get one mother who carried you into the world. That's your mommy. And calling for her, that's natural. That's beautiful. It doesn't make your love for me any smaller." Lily looked down at her shoes. "But you're my cozy mom." Eleanor smiled softly. "And I always will be. You don't have to choose. Love isn't a pie, you don't run out of slices." Lily blinked, confused. "It's not a pie?" Eleanor laughed, her voice warm again. "No, sweetheart. It's more like a candle. You can light 1,000 other candles from one flame, and it doesn't make the first one dimmer. Love just grows." That was enough for Lily. For now. She took Eleanor's hand and led her into the house, the tension forgotten the way only children can forget, not because it didn't matter, but because they trust what they feel more than what they fear. That night, after Lily had gone, Eleanor stood in her kitchen longer than usual. She stared at the teacups, at the crumbs from the sugar cookies they hadn't finished, at the chair still pushed slightly out from the table, the one Lily always used. And she let herself feel it. Not jealousy, not even sorrow. Just the ache of proximity, of being so close to a kind of love that you didn't create, but were allowed to tend, to touch, to shelter. She wrote in her journal that night. Today she called for her mother. And she should have. I wasn't hurt, but a quiet part of me whispered, "Don't forget me too." And then, when I least expected it, she turned back. She looked at me with those impossibly clear eyes and said, "You're my cozy mom." She gave me a name no one else ever has. And I think I'll wear it the rest of my life. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor noticed something new. Lily had started drawing pictures with 3 figures instead of 2, herself, her mother, and Eleanor. Always together. Always linked by long, looping hearts. She gave one drawing to her teacher and proudly explained, "This is my family. I have 2 moms. One who's my real mom and one who's my other real mom." She didn't say step. Didn't say like a. Didn't feel the need to justify the shape of her love. And no one corrected her. At parent-teacher night, Sarah invited Eleanor to come too. Just once. Just to see the classroom Lily always talked about. Eleanor almost declined. But Lily insisted, tugging her hand until she said yes. In the classroom, her name was written on a construction paper heart above Lily's cubby. Cozy Mom Red Heart. The teacher smiled knowingly. "She talks about you like you invented cookies." Eleanor smiled back. "I've had some practice." The garden bloomed later than usual that spring. But bloom it did, wild and full and unashamed. Tulips, lavender, little blue forget-me-nots peeking from between the bricks. Lily helped plant them all, her small fingers dirty with joy. One day, while planting new herbs, Lily looked up and asked suddenly, "Will you always live here?" Eleanor paused, feeling the weight of years in her knees, in her spine, in the quiet math of time. "I'll live here as long as I can, sweet pea," she said softly. Lily frowned. "And after that?" Eleanor thought for a long moment. "After that," she whispered, "maybe the garden will remember me. And maybe will too." "I will," Lily promised. "I'll water everything. And I'll still call you Mom, even if you're not here." Eleanor didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached out, pulled the little girl into her arms, and held her close to the earth, to the flowers, to the wind, to all the quiet things that speak loudest when we listen. And in that moment, she knew. She had become part of a story she never asked for, but one she wouldn't trade for the world.